Bear's eyewitness account, unveiling the untold truth of Custer's last stand. Red Bear's eyewitness testimony unveils the hidden truths surrounding Custer's last stand. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Red Bear, a seasoned scout and warrior, recounts the most intense moments of the Battle of Little Bighorn. His vivid and raw descriptions breathe life into the chaos that engulfed the battlefield. Gunfire ringing out, arrows whistling through the air, and the thunderous war cries echoing across the plains. Having ridden with Custer's 7th Cavalry, Red Bear offers a unique perspective on the cultural clash that marked this historic conflict between two worlds. His gripping account transports us directly into the heart of the battle, where the fate of a nation hangs in the balance. As he narrates the events leading up to the fateful charge, we see how Custer, confident in his command, ordered his men to press forward, specifically instructing the scouts to seize the Dakota horses from their camp. The tension builds as Red Bear describes the moments leading to the charge, painting a picture of the tense atmosphere as warriors prepared for what they knew would be a pivotal encounter. He recalls the faces of his comrades, each one filled with determination, knowing full well the stakes involved. Their mission was not just about reclaiming stolen horses, but also about asserting their sovereignty and defending their way of life against encroaching forces. As the charge began, Red Bear's words pull us deeper into the fray. We hear the roar of the cavalry, see the dust rising in clouds behind them, and feel the urgency of the moment. But as the battle unfolded, it became evident that Custer's bravado would lead them into a trap. Red Bear shares the harrowing moments as the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors, hidden and waiting, launched their fierce counterattack. The tide turned quickly, and the chaos escalated into a maelstrom of conflict. Through Red Bear's eyes, we witnessed the confusion and bravery of both sides. His account doesn't just tell the story of a battle. It illuminates the struggles of a people fighting for their existence. As we listen to his words, we understand that this confrontation was not merely a military engagement, but a clash of cultures and ideals. So sit back as we dive into this compelling narrative together. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to support this community, where we honor the voices of those who lived through these monumental events. Red Bear's testimony is a powerful reminder of the complexity of history and the lasting impact of Custer's last stand. The scouts surged down the drive, and as Red Bear reached the solitary teepee, he found his fellow scouts already encircling it, lashing it with their whips. He joined their efforts, and they paused at the lodge for about half an hour, scanning the area for any signs of danger. One of the scouts remarked, "There's plenty of provisions here," indicating the abundance left behind. One feather stepped inside the teepee, sampling the soup left for a fallen Dakota warrior, and taking a bite of the meat, savoring the remnants of a meal. Just then, Custer appeared with Fred Gerard, who shouted, "You were supposed to move directly into the Sioux village." Custer, having outpaced the soldiers, caught up with the scouts and immediately reprimanded them, his gestures fierce and commanding. "I told you to charge ahead, not linger. You have disobeyed me," he declared, his voice echoing with authority. He gestured for them to step aside, insisting that the soldiers take the lead in the charge. Custer's frustration was palpable as he added, "If any man among you lacks bravery, I'll take his weapons and deem him a woman." His words were sharp, aimed at rallying the scouts and emphasizing the urgency of their mission. The tension in the air was thick, underscoring the precariousness of their situation as the fate of the battle loomed just ahead. One scout replied, "Tell him that if he treats his white soldiers with the same disdain, it will take him a very long time to gather a brave company." The scouts erupted in laughter, their spirits lifted as they signaled their readiness for battle. With renewed determination, they pushed forward, but Red Bear observed that just 50 yards past the solitary teepee, Custer veered to the right with his men, diverging from their path. Gerard pressed on with the scouts, accompanied by Young Hawk, Goose, Black Fox, Red Star, Strikes 2, Bloody Knife, Little Sioux, Bobtailed Bull, Forkhorn, Red Foolish Bear, Boy Chief, Little Brave, and One Feather. They rode hard, charging down toward the Little Bighorn River, adrenaline coursing through them as they crossed the water, and approached the Dakota camp. After crossing, the group split once more. 6 scouts, led by Boy Chief and Red Star, veered sharply to the right, where they spotted the Dakota horses grazing near the timber. Following closely were Strikes 2, Black Fox, Little Sioux, and One Feather, all intent on securing the horses. Meanwhile, Bloody Knife's group pressed directly toward the heart of the Dakota camp, their resolve unwavering as they prepared for the chaos that lay ahead. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, each scout keenly aware of the pivotal moment they were stepping into. Far ahead, Bloody Knife galloped back, 3 horses in tow, calling out, "Someone take these horses back to the hill. One is for me." Although Red Bear couldn't make out who it was through the swirling dust, he later learned of Bloody Knife's return. This group consisted of Bloody Knife, Young Hawk, Goose, Forkhorn, Little Brave, Red Bear, Bobtailed Bull, and 2 Crow Scouts. They converged at the point of the Sioux camp and opened fire with their carbines, the crack of gunfire echoing across the landscape. Dismounting, they began to shoot, taking advantage of their cover. The Dakotas, concealed on the bluffs and hills, quickly retaliated, unleashing a volley of fire in response. At that moment, no one remained on horseback. All were grounded, taking aim from less than a quarter mile away. Forkhorn, positioned at the edge of the timber, called out, "Come this way." As they advanced toward the Dakota village at the ford, the soldiers began to catch up with them. Red Bear noticed they shifted more to the left, glancing over to his right and spotting soldiers lining up across the river. The scene was engulfed in chaos and confusion, the air thick with the sounds of gunfire and shouts. In the midst of the turmoil, Red Bear struggled to recognize any white soldier or officer among the fray, the lines between friend and foe blurring in the heat of battle. When Bloody Knife called out about the horses, the soldiers had yet to dismount, but were already moving alongside the scouts. As Forkhorn shouted directions, Red Bear mounted his horse and rode toward him. Upon reaching Forkhorn, Red Bear dismounted and quickly noticed a Dakota horse with a wound to its neck or cheek approaching Young Hawk's position. Young Hawk, ever bold, struck the horse and proclaimed, "I strike an enemy's horse." The chaos around them intensified, with white soldiers shouting and calling out commands. Young Hawk then rode up to Red Bear, his eyes bright with excitement. "Uncle, I've struck the bay horse. It's mine. Do you have a rope? Take the horse for yourself." Red Bear hesitated, shaking his head. "What's the use? We're in the middle of fighting, and I might be killed. I won't have any use for it." Young Hawk, understanding the gravity of the situation, nodded and rode back to his position. Just then, Little Brave emerged from the timber, urgency etched on his face. He warned, "I overheard the Dakotas in their camp preparing to charge." The tension in the air thickened as they braced for the impending clash, the stakes rising with every heartbeat. "Let me fire one shot at the camp, and then let's retreat to the hill," Little Brave urged, recognizing the overwhelming odds against them. As he dismounted to take aim, Red Bear held his horse steady, ready to react. Little Brave quickly returned, his face serious. "The Dakotas are about to charge. We need to mount up and ride back to the timber, then cross the river." They hastened through the brush towards the riverbank, but just as they reached the edge, they were ambushed. The Dakotas, concealed in the undergrowth, opened fire from their hidden positions along the Little Bighorn. The scouts instinctively retraced their steps, seeking cover as they moved back toward their starting point. As they approached the river, a massive wave of Dakota horsemen surged between the ridge and the water, charging toward the ford with fierce war cries and gunfire echoing through the air. The scene was chaotic, a flurry of movement and noise. Red Bear dismounted as the Dakotas unleashed their fire, leading his horse alongside him. However, a leaning tree caught his saddle horn, abruptly halting his horse and forcing him to adjust his strategy amidst the turmoil. Red Bear tugged insistently at the horse's head, urging it to move forward. After what felt like an eternity, the animal finally complied, but the sudden movement snapped the saddle girth, sending his extra cartridges spilling onto the ground. He attempted to mount again, But the first attempt ended in failure as he lost his balance and fell twice. His canteen had become ensnared beneath him, complicating his efforts further. Each time he struggled to regain his footing, the chaos of battle loomed larger, the cries of warriors and the sounds of gunfire echoing in the background. Finally, after much effort, he managed to swing himself into the saddle. He spotted Little Brave in the distance, who had not dismounted and was galloping ahead, his figure a blur through the smoke and dust of the battlefield. As Red Bear emerged from the cover of the timber, he briefly lost sight of Little Brave. Instead, he caught sight of a small group of soldiers on horseback, retreating toward the same wooded shelter he sought. The sight of them sent a jolt of adrenaline through him, and he felt a mix of apprehension and determination. Suddenly, he witnessed a deep cut in the terrain, causing the soldiers' horses to stumble, their riders shouting in panic as they struggled to maintain control. Quick on his feet, Red Bear deftly steered his horse to the left, skillfully avoiding the treacherous ravine that had ensnared the soldiers. The retreating soldiers quickly faded from view as he pressed on, focusing intently on catching up with Little Brave. Red Bear maintained his pace, scanning the chaotic landscape for any sign of his comrade. As he rode, the dust and smoke thickened, shrouding everything in a surreal haze. Eventually, he spotted a dark figure ahead and, momentarily convinced it was Little Brave, urged his horse to quicken its pace. However, as he approached, he noticed the rider turning sharply to the left, leading him to doubt his initial assumption. Opting to press straight ahead, he passed the point where the figure had veered off, convinced it was not his friend. Just as he was regaining his focus, disaster struck. The ground beneath his horse shifted unexpectedly, causing the animal to stumble and fall. The jarring motion sent Red Bear tumbling to the ground, landing hard amidst the dust and debris. Dazed but determined, he quickly scrambled to his feet, scanning the chaotic battlefield for any trace of Little Brave, knowing he needed to act fast to regroup and escape the danger that was closing in around them. The horse suddenly bolted toward the river, its panic setting Red Bear into action as he sprinted after it. The terrain was open, dotted with a few trees and overgrown with rose bushes, creating a challenging backdrop for the chase. In a moment of chaos, a long, dry limb got caught in the bridle, dragging behind the frightened horse and finally bringing it to a halt. As Red Bear closed the distance, he realized the horse was still spooked, bucking and twisting, making it nearly impossible for him to regain control. With his left hand gripping the bridle and his right still clutching his carbine, he struggled to calm the animal. Just then, his heart raced as he spotted a painted Dakota warrior galloping toward him from upstream on his right. The warrior's face was a striking display of red below and yellow above, with bright yellow paint accentuating his forehead and eyes. Without hesitation, Red Bear raised his carbine and fired, watching as the Dakota warrior fell from his horse. The chaos only intensified. The startled horse reared up and bolted away, leaving Red Bear momentarily in the whirlwind of battle. All around him, he could hear the relentless crack of carbines and the sharp, piercing whistles of the Dakotas, a cacophony that heightened the urgency of the moment. Determined, Red Bear followed the direction of his runaway horse, which had made its way to the river. He spotted it swimming across the water, a figure moving against the current. Without a second thought, he leaped into the river, feeling the cold water envelop him. He swam with purpose, making his way to the horse. Reaching out, he grasped the mane and steadied himself as they crossed the river together, the chaos of battle fading into the background for that fleeting moment. As Red Bear emerged from the river, he caught sight of the dark bay horse belonging to the Dakota warrior he had shot, swimming behind him. The horse had a distinctive white streak on its forehead, adorned with a string of deer hooves around its neck that rattled rhythmically as it made its way across the water. It crossed slightly upstream, a fleeting glimpse of its power and grace amidst the chaos. Nearby, he spotted Little Brave, who had already managed to cross the river but bore the evidence of battle. A wound under his right shoulder bled profusely, soaking his white shirt in crimson. Little Brave's horse was trotting slowly toward the ridge, moving away from Red Bear rather than towards him, indicating the urgency of the situation. Determined to help, Red Bear approached the spot where the Dakota horse had emerged from the river, intending to drive it toward Little Brave, hoping it might provide the wounded warrior with a means of escape. Just as he focused on his task, he noticed movement through the bushes to his left, downstream. Suddenly, Bobtailed Bull's horse burst onto the scene, reins and rope flailing wildly as it bolted past Red Bear, snorting in panic. The sight of the horse, terrified and racing away, filled Red Bear with concern. As it thundered by, Red Bear's gaze was drawn to the saddle, which was stained with blood, a grim reminder of the violence that had unfolded. The frantic energy of the moment heightened his senses, making him acutely aware of the danger surrounding them. He realized the urgency of the situation. Time was slipping away as the battle raged on, and every moment counted. As the chaos continued to unfold, 5 or 6 white soldiers emerged from the thick bushes after having crossed the river, their faces set with determination and urgency. Behind them, Bobtailed Bull's horse trailed, still skittish from the frantic energy of the battle. Red Bear observed the Dakota horse he had been trying to drive also dash after the soldiers, drawn by instinct and the promise of safety. Little Brave, despite his wound and the chaos surrounding them, rode slowly, waving his hand in Red Bear's direction, a gesture that carried an urgent plea for caution. Red Bear interpreted Little Brave's wave as a request to catch one of the horses for him. The young warrior's own mount was clearly exhausted, struggling under the weight of both its rider and the situation. Seizing the moment, Red Bear dismounted swiftly, his mind racing with the possibilities. He lunged for the trailing rope attached to one of the horses. Whether it belonged to the Dakota or Bobtailed Bull was unclear in the frantic atmosphere. But the moment he grasped the rope, the frightened horse bolted, dragging Red Bear through the underbrush. The sudden force caught him off guard, and he felt his moccasins slip from his feet, lost to the rushing waters of the river. Sharp thorns and jagged rose bushes clawed at his bare feet, each step a painful reminder of the peril he faced. The horse surged upstream, pulling him toward the end of the ridge, away from the chaotic scene of the battle. In the distance, Little Brave and the soldiers pressed forward, intent on engaging the Dakota firing line, the sounds of gunfire echoing in the air. Red Bear strained against the pull of the panicked horse, aware that he was becoming separated from his companions. The adrenaline coursed through him, but the situation felt increasingly precarious. Finally, as they reached a small clearing near the ridge, Red Bear realized he had to act quickly. The horse, still wild with fear, was becoming more difficult to manage. With a decisive tug, he released the rope, letting it slip through his fingers. He mounted his own horse, the familiar rhythm of its movements calming him amidst the chaos. As he regained his balance, Red Bear cast a glance back toward Little Brave, who was still managing to keep pace with the soldiers, despite the increasing danger from the Dakota positions above. The urgency of the battle hung thick in the air, and Red Bear knew that every moment counted as they navigated the tumultuous landscape of war. Riding forward, he steeled himself for whatever lay ahead, determined to play his part in the unfolding saga of courage and survival. Red Bear scanned the chaotic battlefield, a sense of dread creeping over him as he realized he could no longer see Little Brave. He feared the worst, that the soldiers had fallen in battle, overwhelmed by the relentless Dakota forces. As he approached the ridge, the sight that greeted him was one of frantic retreat. Soldiers, once organized and confident, now surged back in disarray, their faces painted with panic. At the forefront of this chaotic exodus was Reno, a figure of desperation. A white handkerchief was tied around his head, and a foamy spittle gathered at his mouth and beard, testament to his terror. His eyes were wild, darting as if searching for an escape. The sight was jarring, a stark contrast to the disciplined Officer Red Bear had once known. As Red Bear drew closer, the soldiers mistook him for a Dakota warrior. Panic surged through their ranks, and they raised their carbines, ready to fire. But Red Bear had no time for hesitation. He rode directly to Reno, slapping him firmly on the chest with an open hand. "Scout! Scout!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the confusion like a knife. Reno, still gripped by fear, responded with a panicked shout. "The Sioux! The Sioux!" When Red Bear pointed down the ridge, indicating the enemy's position, Reno's eyes widened in realization. An officer adorned with 3 stripes approached, visibly frazzled. He handed Red Bear some cartridges, addressing him as John, a name that hung awkwardly in the air amidst the chaos. The soldiers, in their frantic state, began firing haphazardly at the Dakotas who had taken higher ground on the ridge. The sound of gunfire was relentless, punctuated by the cries of the wounded and the echoes of commands being barked amidst the chaos. A stray bullet whizzed by, grazing Red Bear's coat at the armpit, a narrow escape that sent a fresh wave of adrenaline coursing through his veins. In the midst of this turmoil, Red Bear noticed a wounded Dakota horse galloping toward their position, its eyes wide with fear. Instinctively, he reached out, eager to catch the animal, perhaps hoping to turn it into a means of escape or a chance to bolster their numbers. But just as he made his move, the soldiers nearby fired, cutting the horse down before Red Bear could get close. The sight of the horse collapsing in a heap struck Red Bear hard. It was a vivid reminder of the violence surrounding them and the stakes at play. He quickly refocused, realizing that the situation was becoming increasingly dire. The soldiers around him continued to fire into the distance, but their aim was erratic, driven more by fear than strategy. Red Bear's thoughts raced as he processed the chaos unfolding around him. He knew that to survive, they needed to regroup and find a way to counter the relentless Dakota forces. With his heart pounding and the weight of the moment pressing down on him, Red Bear steeled himself for what lay ahead, determined to navigate through the turmoil and find a path to safety for himself and the scattered soldiers. Reno's group made a brief halt, but the chaos of the moment was palpable as he struggled to maintain control over his men, who were teetering on the brink of panic. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on him, and it took every ounce of his leadership to keep them from completely falling apart. Just as they began to regain some semblance of order, the Dakotas retreated, their gunfire finally ceasing, leaving a tense silence in its wake. As the dust settled, the remaining scouts regrouped with Reno's men, but the absence of 7 scouts cast a shadow over their fragile unity. Young Hawk, Bloody Knife, Bob-tailed Bull, Little Brave, Fortorn, Red Foolish Bear, and Goose were unaccounted for, their fates uncertain amid the turmoil. Having failed to catch the wounded horse, Red Bear remounted, scanning the chaotic scene for any sign of Little Brave, who had been riding slowly toward him. Cresting the ridge, he spotted White Cloud, a Dakota scout, who shared crucial information. White Cloud informed him that Iroquois scouts had managed to capture some Dakota horses, but had yet to return. The prospect of fresh mounts was tantalizing, and White Cloud suggested they make their way to the other scouts with the horses. Determined, Red Bear led 2 horses he had found, while White Cloud brought along one of his own. As they approached a small hill, their eyes fell upon 4 riders in the distance. A jolt of apprehension coursed through them, as they initially mistook the riders for Dakotas. Acting quickly, they turned back toward Reno's position, unwilling to risk an encounter that could further complicate their already precarious situation. The tension hung thick in the air, each decision weighed down by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. However, as they drew closer, Red Bear realized the riders were Crow scouts who recognized him and greeted him with friendly waves. He called back to White Cloud, noting the distinctive red paint adorning the shoulders of the Crow scouts' white shirts. The Crow scouts halted their horses, and the 2 groups joined forces, exchanging pleasantries and vital updates. The Crow scouts shared somber news. 2 of their comrades had been killed on the ridge, and they planned to return to retrieve their bodies. Red Bear and White Cloud waited patiently for their return. But as time passed and the sun dipped lower in the sky, Red Bear began to feel unease settle in. He suggested they head back to Reno's position, suspecting that the Crow scouts might not come back after all. As they made their way back, they found Reno and his remaining soldiers still huddled in their makeshift positions, anxiously scanning the horizon. The tension in the air was thick as they waited for news. Just then, the scouts who had gone off to find fresh horses began to arrive one by one. First came Bull, splashing through the water, followed closely by Strikes 2, Red Star, Boy Chief, One Feather, Soldier, Stabbed, Strikes the Lodge, and Little Sioux. Later, a larger group of scouts rolled in, herding about 40 captured horses. Among them were familiar faces: Charging Bull, Red Wolf, and White Eagle. The sight of the horses brought a glimmer of hope to the beleaguered group, momentarily lifting their spirits. The successful retrieval of both fresh mounts and comrades signified a small victory amid the chaos, reminding them that resilience was key in the face of overwhelming odds. At Reno's position, the soldiers held the higher ground, while the scouts gathered about 10 rods down the slope, their faces etched with tension and uncertainty. Stabbed rode among them, his voice rising to rally their spirits. "What are we doing, scouts?" he called out, urgency infusing his words. "If we are to be defeated, we must follow Custer's orders. He commanded us to fall back to the Powder River, where we can find the rest of our scouts, the wagons, and our provisions." Among the gathered scouts was Pretty Face, who had joined them from the pack mule train. Red Bear hadn't seen the mule train, but knew that Pretty Face was likely with the herd scouts making their way back. The soldiers, partially dismounted, appeared disorganized, and Red Bear noticed a distinct lack of officers overseeing the situation. As the scouts shared their concerns about the 7 comrades they had lost, Red Bear felt a wave of relief wash over him at being reunited with those who remained. The weight of their collective grief was palpable, yet it did not dampen their resolve. Stab took charge, instructing some scouts to manage the horse herd while others would stay behind to fend off the advancing Dakotas. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of determination and anxiety as they prepared for the challenges ahead. Each scout understood the stakes: the survival of their people and the continuation of their fight against overwhelming odds. The scouts selected to lead the horse herd included Bull in the Water, Charging Bull, Red Wolf, White Eagle, Red Star, Pretty Face, Red Bear, One Feather, and PTAT, a Dakota scout. They set off with determination, knowing that their mission was vital for their people's survival. Meanwhile, those who remained behind to hold off the advancing Dakotas were Strikes 2, Stab Soldier, Boy Chief, Strikes the Lodge, Little Sioux, White Cloud, C.A. Rue, ESC, a half-breed Dakota interpreter, and Bull. The 10 scouts guiding the horse herd had barely begun their journey when they were joined by Bear Waiting, the Dakota scout known for his keen sense of the situation, who had come from Atoxa to assist in holding back the Dakotas. Red Bear and his fellow scouts pressed on, passing the solitary teepee they had encountered earlier, and continuing their trek 6 miles beyond it by sundown. They followed the same worn trail they had taken that fateful morning, every step echoing with the weight of their shared experiences. Shortly after their departure, Bull caught up with them, having been sent by Strikes 2 with an urgent message. "Hasten your pace," he urged, breathless from the effort. "The Dakota tents are being dismantled, and they fear a pursuit." The tension in the air thickened as the reality of their precarious situation sank in. Knowing they were being hunted, the scouts quickened their pace, determination burning in their hearts as they navigated the path ahead, fully aware that their actions in these critical moments could shape the fate of their people. As night enveloped the landscape, Bull rejoined the group, and Red Wolf, along with Bull and the Water, rode ahead of the herd. The tranquility of the evening was abruptly shattered by the sharp sound of 3 gunshots ringing out in the distance, sending a ripple of alarm through the scouts. Instinctively, they surrounded the herd and pressed forward, navigating the darkness towards Rosebud Valley. The 2 scouts who had ventured ahead quickly fell back, their senses heightened by the gunfire, and rejoined the main group, realizing that the Dakotas were closing in and that their escape depended on swift action. Recognizing the urgency, they selected fresh horses and surged ahead. The remaining scouts, tasked with driving the herd from behind, soon spotted a swirling cloud of dust rising from the trail behind them, an unmistakable sign of the approaching Dakotas. Understanding the imminent danger, they too grabbed fresh mounts and rode around the herd, urgency propelling them forward. As they continued their frantic flight, the black silhouette of timber loomed ahead, a welcome sight for the exhausted and parched scouts. They halted at the edge of the forest, hearts pounding and breaths labored. One scout bravely rode ahead to search for a water source and soon called out excitedly, having found a muddy waterhole just beyond a cut bank. Without hesitation, the scouts guided their weary horses over the bank, sliding down to the waterhole, where the promise of hydration and a momentary reprieve awaited them amidst the chaos. Each scout fashioned a makeshift drinking spot with their hands, scooping water from the muddy hole as it slowly filled. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough to quench the thirst of their horses, which added to their growing anxiety. As they rested and exchanged hushed conversations, Old Buffalo spoke up, asserting that he knew the way out. Trusting his knowledge, the group decided to follow him towards the Rosebud River, arriving there just as midnight cloaked the land. Under the cover of darkness, they continued onward, making their way to what is now the Cheyenne Agency, reaching it at daybreak. As dawn's light broke, they climbed a high ridge and paused to take in the sweeping view below, where the remnants of the Dakota Sundance site lay. The Dakota Scout advised caution, suggesting they stay put for the day to better observe their surroundings from the elevated vantage point. The scouts spent the day resting some, drifting into sleep while others remained vigilant, keeping watch for any signs of danger. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they resumed their journey, riding through the night until they arrived at the camp where Bloody Knife had been intoxicated at dawn. With the remnants of the camp scattered around them, the scouts eagerly scavenged for food, discovering a treasure trove of meat and hardtack that would serve as their much-needed breakfast. They crossed the Rosebud River at the same spot as before, soon discovering that Stab's scout party had hurriedly crossed ahead of them, their tracks easily recognizable from Stab's mule. Following the winding path of the Rosebud to its mouth, they arrived at the old camp and last parade ground. There, remnants of a recent campfire greeted them, including empty cooking cans scattered about. It was clear this had been the breakfast camp for the party that had passed through before them. With the sun now climbing toward noon, they made their way down the bank of the Rosebud, searching for supplies. To their relief, they found boxes of partially spoiled hardtack, which they quickly packed onto their saddles, knowing it would bolster their provisions. However, the party led by Strikes 2 mistook Red Bear's group for Dakota warriors and hastened their pace, quickly disappearing from view. Red Bear's group continued along the old Custer Trail at a slower pace, taking care to avoid any unnecessary risks. As they neared the Tongue River, they decided to set up camp in the timber atop a ridge, seeking the cover and safety it provided. The following morning, they crossed the Tongue River and stumbled upon a grim sight, the location where a soldier had been brutally clubbed to death. The scene served as a stark reminder of the violence that had unfolded in the area and the ever-present dangers lurking in their path. As they pressed on, the scouts finally reached the Powder River camp, where they were met by Strikes 2's party, alongside a company of infantry and a wagon train led by the commander, known as the Wearer of the White Hat, from Fort Buford. Through interpreters, including the Santee, Half-Breed Dakota, and Crow Bear, the scouts eagerly shared their first-hand accounts of the recent battle with the officer. The commander gathered the scouts, instructing them to bring in their horses for selection. He intended to choose the two finest mounts for Foolish Bear and White Cloud, tasking them with carrying urgent messages to the officer who had traveled up the Elk River by steamboat to the mouth of the Bighorn River. With their assignments clear, Foolish Bear and White Cloud prepared for the journey. They expertly swam their horses across the Yellowstone or Elk River, pulling a small raft behind them that held their carbines and a message bag containing crucial information. The crossing was a challenge, but the scouts' determination saw them through. After successfully navigating the waters, they rode towards the Bighorn mouth, delivering their messages and gathering vital intelligence. Their return journey took several days, but upon arrival, they summoned Strikes 2 and Bull in the Water to cross over and carry the mail back to Fort Buford. Once their mission was complete, Foolish Bear and White Cloud recrossed the river, rejoining their fellow scouts, bolstered by the knowledge that their swift actions would contribute to the larger efforts of their people in these tumultuous times. Red Bear never saw Little Brave again, believing that all the soldiers had been killed. I hope this first-hand account gives you a deeper understanding of the Battle of Little Bighorn and the Great Sioux War of 1876. Stay tuned for more videos where we'll dive into more first-hand accounts of different battles. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.